Welcome back, everybody, to more from the Sable Eyes. I'm here today with Blake. How are we doing, Blake?
I'm doing well, thanks, Mitch.
That is good. Now, this is the third or fourth attempt to film this video, so we're going to give it a red-hot crack this time. There's no weather. Everything should be fine. We're going to have a look at but a Porygon Beast Box. Some conversation on Facebook and Verbank and Heyfonte and those kind of things about Porygon and Naganadel GX, and we've done some tweaks, and you've come up with a list that might have some potential.
Yeah, we did some testing with this list after being persuaded to have a go at this very interesting Porygon Beast list that we found on Facebook from Tom's post. I'm sure Mitch will be able to find a link for you if you want to check it out in the description. But yeah, it's very interesting, so we thought we'd give it a go, and this is what we've come up with so far after having tested. So we've got 4 point ball. Now, honestly, I think you can run either one, but I think with this list, the damage doesn't come up as often as maybe in some other lists like Blacephalon or something like that, so maybe just checking your prize cards might be a bit more useful, but you know, if you're counting your deck, then you should be able to know what your prize cards are anyway, so
Yeah,
there's a potential that the poison one is more useful, but I prefer this one.
It's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, because ultimately, if you're attacking with Poipole, then something's gone wrong anyway. In this deck, maybe the poison is relevant. Maybe they like retreat, and they've taken like 30 damage or something like that, and a Venom Shot could potentially take a big knockout. But I think either is fine, because ultimately, in the end, if you are attacking with it, then you're probably not in the best position to win the game anyway.
Yeah, that's it for sure. Otherwise, nothing else to add to the but we play 3 copies of the new Naganadel GX. This card is pretty exceptional. Its ability Ultra Conversion allows you to trade away an Ultra Beast to draw 3 new cards, so very reminiscent of Zorok GX, which just recently will have rotated out of this form.
Yeah, and it's good to have a card that is able to draw those extras, and obviously it's not as fluid as Zoroark was. It's not able to trade anything. It has to trade Ultra Beasts, but in comparison, you're able to draw the extra card, 3 cards instead of 2, and it means your deck is going to be ripping through cards very, very quickly, and obviously the engine is built around getting those beasts into hand. It just means that the deck isn't quite as flexible as Zoroark used to be.
Yeah, it's funny. I thought the limitation would be difficult to say the least. By comparison to Zoro, might be a bit annoying. Honestly, like getting the Ultra Beast isn't really the annoying part. The limitation that I didn't really foresee was that there's a limited amount of times you can just use the trade function. You're gonna run out of Ultra Beasts and/or ways to shuffle them back into your deck now that we've lost cards like Rescue Stretcher and stuff like that.
Yeah, so obviously you need to make sure that you are getting the value out of those cards when you use them, but hey, the option to draw extra cards is never a bad one, and the best thing about Naganadel GX is that it doesn't just have a really busted ability, it has a really good attack as well. Venom Shot for 1 Psychic and triple colorless does 170 damage to any Pokemon on your opponent's board. With a Beast Energy you can do 200 to the active, or you can just knock out the support Pokemon like Tapu, not Tapu Lele, that's gone. Dedenne GX is what I'm thinking about. Dedenne GX.
Yeah, the old Tapu Dedenne.
Tapu Dedenne, you can get rid of that one for 170. And if your opponent doesn't play Mew, then you could potentially set up some really, really big turns with Naganadel.
Yeah, the attack really is one of the cornerstones of this deck for sure. It's super powerful. And like you said, with the Beast Energy, you're pushing 200, so you can knock out stuff like Ultra Cosma and other such Pokemon that still exist format that are relevant with 200 or less HP.
It certainly is, and its Injection GX attack is okay. For 1 Lightning, you can put one of your opponent's discarded cards into their prizes, so maybe against like Giratina Malamar, you can get rid of an energy, or even a Giratina if there's one in there, put that into the prizes, and make your opponent take a prize to access that vital card. It's probably not the GX attack that you're 100% going to be going for all the time, but it's still an interesting option.
No, for sure. We do run at least one other useful GX attack, so always keep that in mind. But injection does have its uses, of course. The Malamar one that you spoke of, but there's also like other decks where they revolve around their discard pile. Like for instance, there's new Shedinja decks that are really annoying. Once they lose a Shedinja, you can chuck it back in the prizes. Um, just like remove one entire Shedinja out of their little rotation they've got going on, and that can be really difficult for them to get back into access of straight away, because the deck, most of them don't take prizes.
Well, yeah,
Currently.
Shedinja is going to really struggle to take a prize, considering its game plan doesn't revolve around winning the game. So that could be a particularly good use.
So that rounds out all of the uses for Nagano GX, and we play one of the old Nagano GX, infamous from the Checkmate deck, which recently took out NIIC. We still have access to that Stinger GX to set up some checkmates of our own. We do play a couple ways to set up that 3 prize turn. Obviously, we still play a Mew, which the old deck used as one of its ways to set up the checkmate. We also run the Pheromosa Buzzwole tag team Jet Punch, which is another way you can set up a 3 prize turn if you're not up against a tag team.
Yeah, so like against tag teams, you can half hit one of them and then just sting a GX and you're one attack away from taking the knockout. But with Buzzwole and Mew, you've got some difficult numbers to set up, but it is possible to make it so that your opponent has 2 Pokemon on the field with 30 or 20 or even 10 damage left, so it's possible to get yourself a checkmate. It's just not as flexible and useful as it was with Zoroark. Missing things like Giratina in this deck means that obviously it's not going to be quite as useful, but it's a good option to have regardless. And its first attack is still really good, especially considering the amount of beasts that we're playing.
Yeah, Beast Raid 20 times the number of Ultra Beasts in play. You can put out a similar amount of damage to a Zoroark that you're used to seeing with the Riot Beat attack. So that can be pretty potent, especially with an amplified Beast Energy. You can almost get up to the amount you would like to see to one-shot a Mewtwo and Mew tag team, which is pretty big considering the amount of hype that you're seeing.
Yeah, so if you are in a lucky position where you've got 5 or even 6 beasts on the field, you probably won't, but Naganadel could potentially get that one shot on Mew Mew. It's actually the matchup that we're going to test this deck in first, so it's definitely an option going forward, but obviously there's going to be some Pokemon on the bench that aren't beasts, and I think you're going to run through them now.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have a few. One last thing I'd like to note is just quickly that main reason this deck would have trouble with setting up the checkmate is because obviously the old Zoroark deck was set up to perfectly use checkmate, whereas this one is just sort of might be able to use it.
Yeah, it gives you the option
That's
to.
the key
Yeah.
difference.
It's not going to do it every game.
Yeah, exactly. But getting on to more of the meat of the deck, we have Acceleration, which is a 3/3 Porygon Z line. This card with Crazy Code, its ability, allows you to play as many special energy as you like from your hands to your Pokemon. Very powerful Rain Dance ability that we've seen from one of these later sets.
Yeah, and with this amount of special energy that we have use of in this particular deck, we can power up pretty much any attack in the game in one shot. Naganadel GX's Venom Shot is 4 energy. It's very hefty, very expensive, but with Porygon, it's so easy. Rainbow Energy, Beast Energy, and a triple accelerated energy gets you there. It's super, super convenient, and it's the reason that this deck works at all. Obviously, without it, it would be a clunky, clunky mess. But with Porygon Z, as long as you can get it out, you can start attacking, and you can attack with relative consistency.
Yeah, with Porygon Z out on the field, it's a far less clunky mess.
It's still a bit of a mess, though.
It still struggles at times. Obviously, like the first 2 turns of the game are probably the hardest turns of the entire match you're gonna find most times. Once you're set up and you're starting to, ultra conversion away those ultra beasts that you don't want, that's when you're really moving, and that's when the deck's gonna shine. But early days, it can crumble from early pressure. because the deck is very difficult to set up.
Yeah, and in a pinch, Porygon Z can also be an attacker. Triple colorless energy for 120 Tantrum. This Pokemon's now confused. It's obviously not the best attack in the deck, but it is worth remembering. You never know, you might be able to get a useful half hit on something like a Pikachu Zekrom and allow it to be sniped by an Ganondorf 4-game next turn. So just be aware of it, and there is the option to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Alright, so from here I think we'll move on to our Ultra Beast package. This isn't as large as I thought it was going to be initially when building this list, but we sort of trimmed it down as we began moving through the matchups. But first up we've got Buzz Mosa Tag Team. Its first attack, Jet Punch, is 30 damage and 30 snipe to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Very strong attack. Second up we have Elegant Soul. For 2 grass and a colorless, it does a 190. Elegant Soul's base damage is what, 80 next turn? 60. 60. I knew it was low.
It was a low number. It may as well be nothing.
Yeah. Which we can actually power up with units and rainbow energies and the like. This deck with the special energy, and then of course the Beast Game GX, which we can almost just about power up. I think everything goes right for the extra requirement to take extra prizes, but I think we'll mostly be trying to use just the one extra prize in this deck somehow.
Yeah, the GX attack seems like it would be really easy to get to, but because with Porygon Z you can attach as many energy as you like, but unfortunately the deck doesn't actually run enough energy to realistically get into a Beast Game GX. But hey, 50 damage and take an extra prize is sometimes all you need, and if you're setting up those 170s around the board, you can take a big knockout on a GX, maybe an Ultra Necrozma, maybe you can put a Pikachu Zekrom within range of a Beast Game with a Beast Energy on it. I think 170 plus 80 is 240-ish. So you can...
About 250 MF, checks out.
Something like that. So you can get some big turns with this GX attack if you need to. But obviously, Jet Punch and Elegant Soul are both good attacks to be running with as well. It's a good kind of side attacker to have alongside Naganadel and the rest of the basic beasts that can only attack on specific turns.
Yeah, it's a real good neutral attacker, and considering the HP, if you're not up against a Reshiram deck, then it's going to be able to take some hits for you as well, which is also very useful.
Yeah, he's a buff boy.
Speaking of buff boys, pictured on the previous card is a baby Buzzwole, which will also help us in our Pikarom matchup. It's infamous at this point. It's been in just about everything, can manage to run Rainbow or a Fighting Energy. For 1 Fighting Energy, Sledgehammer does 30, but if your opponent is on 4 prize cards, it does 90 more, which is able to one-shot Gizek.
Yeah, man, there's not many decks that are going to be able to realistically skip the 4 prize turn if you don't allow them to. You set yourself up in situations where decks have to take big knockouts, and even then, if you do have that turn skipped, which it's going to happen now and then, the good thing about this deck is that you can actually power up Swing Around, which saw a bit of play in the past in our Worlds deck last year, but it now is actually relatively easy to power up, since you can just put down 2 rainbows or 2 units or whatever coloured energy we have, and then another colourless. We can swing around for 80, flip a couple of heads, and there's a dead Pikarom on the spot.
Yeah, absolutely. Skipping the beasts, the Sledgehammer turn against this deck is no longer as strong as you would like, because we play the outs to use the second attack for a lot of damage, where just one swing around heads will get us there.
It certainly will. It certainly will. It's a good attacker. I'd like to see more of him.
Next up, very much in the same light as Buzzwole, we have the new Circuitry, which pretty much says the exact same thing for 1 Lightning, except it's when your opponent is on 3 prize cards instead of 4.
So if they do skip the Beast Ring turn, then you can just jump into Circuitry and hit for 120 anyway, which is a pretty reasonable thing. The downside for Circuitry is that its second attack isn't as good. I think it only does 50 for 2, and there's some random text.
Yeah.
And
Fusion.
And also, it doesn't hit for weakness on anything relevant in the format at the moment. So that's the downside to running the circuitry, but it does give you the option for that if your opponent is on 3 prizes. If they try and skip the beast ring, the what do you call it? The punchy boy attack. Sledgehammer, thank you. You can just use circuitry instead. We're having a great video today, Blake. This is prime content.
This is outstanding. Yeah. No, the sledgehammer-esque attack from circuitry is potent, but until we find a matchup to exploit it against with lightning weakness, then it's not going to be as good quite as its older brother, Baby Buzzwole. But still worth enough, strong enough for an inclusion here.
Yeah, and you can. It's half hitting. That's the key, right? It's going to half hit something, or it's going to put something within the range of a Venom shot. So that's the key.
And last up for our Ultra Beast, we play the Nihilego. With Nightcap, one cycle. If your opponent's on 2 prized cards, you may choose one of your opponent's Pokemon and use one of its attack as this attack.
Which is really, really powerful against things like Reshiram Charizard, which are able to deal out huge amounts of damage. If you can do 230 with a Nihilego, then you're in a really good spot. And the funny thing is as well, if you attach the correct energy to Nihilego, you can realistically use their GX attack for the full 300 damage.
Yeah, we discovered this kind of by accident when we were testing this, that when we realized that we could copy Reshiram's attacks, we were worried because they sort of fell short against killing opposition Reshirams. And we thought, wait a second, we can actually attach, if we just attach 3 Rainbow to this Nihilego in addition to the cost of Nightcap, then that fulfills the requirements for Double Blaze to go off and do 300 damage and go through bonus effects, which is hilarious.
Yeah, so it's potential to knock out a Reshiram Charizard with a 1 prize attacker in 1 hit, which is, hey, if you can get it to happen, that sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, I mean, if your opponent's down on 2 prizes in this scenario and you can pull that off, then it's probably probably winning either game.
Probably.
And now we're getting to our support Pokemon and our non-Ultra Beast attackers. First up, we play a Tapu Fini. Now, this card is excellent at ruining Blacephalon's hopes and dreams.
Mm-hmm.
For its second attack, it does 100. It's a cost of 2 water and a colorless, which we could actually power up in fairness in this deck, but because this card is unfair, the text reads, if your opponent has an Ultra Beast Pokemon, I think, in play, this attack cost is 1 colorless instead of the usual cost. So, for 1 colorless, you can just one-shot a Blacephalon.
It effectively reads, this card knocks out a Blacephalon. That's all it says on the card.
For 1 attachment.
One energy of any type. You can put it in any deck you want. It just takes a knockout on a Blacephalon. And hey, if it puts them on the Beast Ring turn, then whatever, because they can knock out this Tapu Fini anyway. It's done the job. So it's a very, very powerful attacker, and with Naganadel GX being able to draw lots of cards, you being able to search out lots of Pokemon, and being able to attach any energy that you like, you can actually attach like a recycle energy to this Tapu Fini in that matchup, take a knockout, and you don't even need to waste the energy. It comes straight back to your hand when Blacephalon ends up knocking it out.
Yeah, exactly. Recycling is very useful. Don't have to sacrifice any energy on our non-GX attackers that might die. Like our next one, you might find yourself using Mew as an attacker. Very powerful in this format. Ability to spread damage counters around, but also to block tag bolts and other venom shots and the like from your opponent.
Yeah, and you're kind of hoping your opponent doesn't play a Mew, which is a silly thing to say because everyone will be playing Mew. But Venom Shot, obviously, is not placing damage counters, it's doing damage, so Mew blocks it. But if you're able to maybe knock out their Mew, either through using one of your other non-GX attackers, or even just by placing damage counters with Mew a couple of times if you're able to, then you can potentially really swing a game around with this card, because you can set up some interesting numbers around the place. Like Ultra Necrozma needs 2 damage on it before it gets knocked out by a by a Venom Shot. So you can just put 2 on there and maybe 1 on something else that you're planning on knocking out down the line. And you can also use it to start fiddling around with some of your Ultra Beast maths as well. Like if you want to knock out, like, I don't know, an Aganadel on the bench with a Buzzwole, maybe you can set it up a little bit early with Mew with 1 extra damage. So it's a really cool and universal card that every deck really should be playing. But obviously its ability is its prime reason for being.
Yeah, and you can also, in case Buzzwole wasn't, Blacephalon wasn't easy enough due to the use of Tapu Fini, but you'd always put 10 on 2 different Blacephalons and put them in 170 range for a Venom Shot as well, so that they're always going to be in range to be knocked out by a Venom Shot.
Yeah, by something. And that means if you've taken a knockout with Tapu Fini already, then you've essentially set yourself up for the game, and there's not much that your opponent's going to realistically be able to do.
Yeah, exactly. And lastly, we play recently what this deck was not running, but we instantly found very necessary, which was a copy of the Dedenne, just to help us power through those slow early turns and get down some basics and draw ourselves into draw supporters.
Yeah, like you said earlier in the video, those early turns are a little bit rough sometimes, and the ability to search out Dedenne GX with Cherish Ball or Pokecoms if you've got Pokemon in hand means that you don't need to stress so hard about those kind of awkward first 2 turns. Once you've got Ultra Conversion to Ganadel in play, you're going to be drawing cards, but turn 1 you can't, so you need to make sure that you've at least got something going. Obviously you'll be a bit upset to see Porygon pieces go away, or even some of your Ultra Beasts head into the discard, but it's a small price to pay to ensure that you're at least going to be able to start attacking in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely, and we do of course play Recovery for a deck such as this, which so happily throws away its Pokemon.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll move on to our supporter line here. It's very thin, which is why you'll begin to see why we worry about the first turn. We play 4 copies of Lily, 2 copies of Cynthia, and a Broxgrit to recover our lost Pokemon. Now, Lily is the premier Term 1 supporter. Obviously, it's a bit harder now that we don't have Tapu Lele to just fetch it for us every first turn of the game. If we so have the search for Lele, it's a bit harder now, so you have to play 4 copies in every list if you want to use it on the first turn.
Yeah, but apart from that, the supporter line's very, very thin. Broxgrit is a super powerful card in this deck, and I'd almost like to see more than 1 copy of it, because the ability, like Broxgrit essentially says, draw 3 cards for the next 3 turns. Because what you're going to do is you're going to shuffle in the Ultra Beasts that you've discarded using Naganadel GX, and when you shuffle them in, you use your stadium, which we'll go through in a second. Ultra Space is a pretty good stadium. Grab them back out to continue drawing. So I'd almost like to see another one, but obviously there's still a lot of water to go under the bridge with this deck. It's a very, very early draft from us, so definitely room for one, but that supporter line's super thin. We need to make sure that we're drawing cards as quickly as possible to mitigate the fact that we don't have that much going on for us in the supporter area.
Yeah, absolutely. A second Broxgrit would be at the top of the list for cards to add to this deck if we can find the space. But as far as Pokemon Search is concerned, we'll start off with 4 copies of Ultra Space, which is just excellent in this deck. You're going to need a steady flow of Ultra Beasts, and that is what Ultra Space provides. It's the perfect fuel for Ultra Conversion, also for your early game setup.
Yeah, you can get pretty much every Pokemon in the deck with this particular stadium. You're not going to be able to find Porygon or Dedenne or some of those special tech attackers, but it's interesting. What you can do is you can either use them to draw cards, or you can use that stadium to find a Pokemon to trade away with Pokemon Communication to grab the card that you need. So it gives you access to pretty much every Pokemon in the deck when you need it, and it's going to be your late game consistency to help you draw through your deck. So definite 4 of for this one. Sometimes you worry about stadiums being too high, but this count is a 100% 4 all the time.
I'd play a 5th, if I could.
If you were allowed to.
We play 4 Mysterious Treasure. Of course, the entire Naganadel line is of course either Psychic and or Dragon. So Mysterious Treasure is a must in this list. A few of our other attackers are also Psychic and or Dragon, so that also comes up clutch there. And also the ability to discard and thin out cards we don't need in specific matchups is also useful. Not as necessary in this list, don't really have much synergy with the discard, but you know, discarding and thinning out cards is never a bad thing.
Yeah, if you've got like 2 Porygon Z left in your deck and you just don't need them anymore, you don't feel bad about getting rid of one of them with a Mysterious Treasure. So being able to do that with this deck is really good. And like you said, finding all of the main consistency pieces with your deck using Mysterious Treasure or Ultra Space means that you're most likely going to have a pretty well set up board on your second or third turn.
Absolutely. Now, next up we have 4 copies of Pokemon Communication. As Mitch spoke about, with Ultra Space in play, Pokemon Communication is almost always ready to be used, so you can just grab out an Ultra Beast that you don't need and use a Pokecom to shuffle it back in, and then grab out tech attackers.
Yeah, you can grab out anything that you want. So yeah, you can use it in conjunction with your Mysterious Treasure or with your Ultra Space. Very, very good. Blake and I are going to play a bit of a game here because it sounds like he's dropping in and out a little bit. This is the problem that we were having the first time, but it's okay because this time I'm sure as hell going to get this video done. So if you hear him drop in or out a little bit, that's okay. He's going to chuck down some more cards now. Go, Blake.
Yep. I have 3 copies of Rare Candy. This is of course what we need to evolve into our Porygon Z line. In most decks you'd probably see 4 if you're desperate to get that stage 2 out, but obviously this deck has a lot of powerful draw support in the Ultra conversion, which allows us to get into our rare candies faster.
Yeah, 3 isn't so bad, and the 3-3-3 kind of line for Porygon Z is usually enough to get 1 out, and 1 is all you realistically need. So 3 Rare Candy doesn't clog up the deck, but it's still required to make sure that you can get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, with the rest of our trainers, they're a bit of utility. We play 2 copies. In the original list, there were 3 copies of Super Scoop Up. It's probably one of the only cards I thought that we didn't use in every matchup, but could be cut for more consistency. So with more testing, we might find that we actually need the 3rd one, but these can be used to scoop up damaged Ultra Beasts and either reuse them or trade them away for more cards. Very useful with the Buzzmosa tag team for 1, and the Ganadel GX as well.
Yeah, so
get that damaged.
The key for Super Scoop Up is that you're able to pick up the Ganadel GX like you would with Acerola and Zoroark decks and just continue to chain those trades if you need to. Not only does it get damage off of the board and stop your opponent from taking knockouts or get Dedenes off of the board if you don't want them to be killed yourself, but it also gives you that chance of a couple of extra cards to get you across the line. Have to flip heads though.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, 2 50-50 chances that healing Pokemon isn't the best, so if anything, rather than re-add the cards, it might be the case where we just cut the card altogether, but we'll see how we go with the testing. Now, we have one last bit of ball search. We play 1 Cherish Ball to help supplement the need for finding Dedenne GX in those early turns, and also our Naganadel pieces in the first couple turns, just to get ourselves drawing cards.
Yeah, sometimes you don't want to discard with Mysterious Treasure to grab yourself a Naganadel. You can use Cherish Ball, and the 1 copy is a bit of insurance just to make sure that you are able to, you've got as much chance of finding Dedenne as is reasonably possible without breaking the deck. So it gives you that extra chance, but it's also useful to get yourself Naganadel GX or even Buzzwole Pheromosa if you need it.
Absolutely, there's 6 targets in total. All of them can be very useful on the deck. And lastly, the deck would be complete without a reset stamp.
Yep, just the one.
Just the 1 reset stamp, but it can be enough to get you there. Now, one interesting play that we didn't have access to before is you're using the old Naganadel GX. You can reset stamp your opponent to 1 and or 2 cards, and then Stinger GX, and then set yourself in a really favorable position to close out the game while your opponent is now back on 3 prize cards.
Yeah, and in conjunction with the other Naganadel, the new one that we're featuring, if you're able to set up that kind of half hit, or like if you're close to being able to get that checkmate but you're not quite there, then maybe a stamp to a low hand size and a stinger is the play you want to make. Because your opponent, if they're not able to get 3 prizes in the next couple, or 2 prizes in the next couple of turns, they're going to really struggle to deal with the fact that you're sniping around when they have no cards in hand. So it's a really cool niche little play. Obviously requires a lot of stuff in hand and a lot of pieces in the right place at the right time. But if you can get it off, it can sometimes just be game ending.
Yeah, and luckily we play a deck which draws a lot of cards.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to give ourselves the best chance to find them.
Absolutely. And now we come to the most complicated part of the deck, which this usually isn't the case when we get to this part of the video.
Normally you just go, and 8 psychic energy, and then we move on. Yeah. But it's probably the most interesting.
It's the energy count. Start off with, the only count of special energy we play max of is 4 copies of unit energy, the psychic, metal, and lightning one. Obviously, most of our attackers function off of this one, so that's why we play the max count. Obviously, we can use Xurkitree, Nihilego, Zidane, Naganadel, any of the Naganadels. Pretty much only the 2 Buzzwole attackers and perhaps one other don't use this unit energy to attack. So we play 4 of this one because it's the most universal in the
Yeah, and it provides colourless energy, so Mew and Tapu Fini can use it as well. It's just a shame that there's no like realistically strong Metal Ultra Beast. We could put like Celesteela or whatever it's called in there, but I don't know. It's probably not good.
My original Beast Box list had a copy of Celesteela. It's Moonraker attack for Metal and 4 colourless energy, does 160. But of course, the text reads: if you and your opponent are on a combined total of exactly 6 prizes, then this cost is 1 medal instead.
Yeah, it's a little less a little less doable than things like Buzzwole and Xurkitree.
Yeah, rather than extra damage, it's a cheap cost, which is a bit harder to work around. It's got a similar sort of thing to Fini, where if you meet the conditions, it reduces the cost. But of course, the conditions are a lot harder to meet in this scenario, which is why the card has ended up being excused from this list, because it's a bit too specific for not large enough of a payoff.
Yeah, if it did 300 damage, then yeah, it's great. But it doesn't, so...
Yeah, absolutely. So, next up we have 3 copies of Rainbow Energy. Rainbow Energy, of course, useful for everything.
Yes, you can use this on any of your Pokemon.
But with the one caveat of putting a damage counter on your Pokemon. So you don't want to be stacking up too many Rainbow Energies on the one Pokemon, otherwise they might be able to get one-shot by certain Pokemon they were tanking. So you have to be very careful with your Rainbow Energy attachments to make sure that you're not dooming the Pokemon that you attach these to. But of course they provide the necessary energy for them to attack, so in some cases it might be avoidable.
Yeah, and usually this is the go-to energy for things like Buzzwole, Pheromosa, or Buzzwole, because finding the Beast Energy is sometimes unrealistic. Rainbow Energy doesn't have a massive downside, like 250 and 260 are essentially the same number when it comes to the maths that we're likely to be seeing in this format. So Rainbow Energy finds a home underneath Buzzwole, Pheromosa quite frequently.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting those early jet punches in to start setting up your numbers is always very useful. Next up, we have 3 copies of the brand spanking new Recycle Energy. This card is far better than I originally anticipated it to be, but of course it needs to be in the same home as a Porygon Z list for sure to get its maximum use. But the text is, it provides 1 colorless energy, and if this card is in play and were to go to the discard pile, it instead goes into your hand.
Yeah, there's a lot of uses for this card that you don't initially think about. Obviously, if you attach it to Naganadel, instead of discarding the energy, because it requires 2 energy to be discarded if I'm correct,
yes,
then you can just put them back into your hand if you've got 2 energy, 2 recycle energy on there. It even kind of features as a free retreat option in this deck. You don't need to have a Pokemon that has no retreat, because you can just attach a recycle energy, or as many as you need to, and then retreat with them, get them back in your hand, and attach them to your attacker again. So even though you only play 3 of them, it's probably the energy card that you're going to place down the most in this deck.
You can place it down an infinite amount of times, and it gives you, most importantly, an infinite amount of Venom shots, because honestly, it'd be the one attack that you'd want to have an infinite amount of if you were to choose, especially when it has such a cost where you have to discard energy. But yeah, the free retreat thing is something I overlooked initially, and basically the heaviest Pokemon in the whole deck is Buzzwole, Pheromosa, and the Porygon. The Buzzwole with 2 retreat, which really isn't much at all. You just need to attach 2 recycles with Porygon and retreat, get them back to your hand, and then you're free to just attach them to your new Pokemon, which is...
It's really strong.
Yeah.
And you
don't need your switch cards or escape boards or anything like that.
And it's something that we just didn't consider when you saw it, but hey, it's really good in practice. Anyway, we've talked about how good recycle energy is for long enough.
Let's talk about another relatively new special energy. We played 2 copies of the triple acceleration energy. Of course, there are some games where you are playing this deck, and sometimes the Porygon Z pieces just don't come frequently and in the right time, so you don't have a Porygon Z out when you want to start attacking, especially with Naganadel GX. So you want to make it as easy as possible, reduce yourself to just 2 energy attachments. You get that unit energy or the rainbow on your Naganadel GX, and 1 attachment of a triple acceleration energy will allow you to use Venom Shot without the Porygon Z in play.
Yeah, and it kind of doesn't, in the same way as recycle energy, it doesn't really matter about discarding it, because you would have had to discard it anyway, so you can just kind of chuck it away. It's good, especially in the early game, when you're struggling to set up, like Blake was saying, if Porygon Z's gone missing, but even if you're still drawing really well, sometimes you just need to attach a triple colorless to the active and then start using your other energy to start setting up Pokemon on your bench. So it gives you an out to an attack when you need it in the early game if you're struggling, but it also means that you don't need to stress about committing a ton of energy in different places. You can just chuck on 1 that's going to get discarded anyway and Venom Shot to your heart's content.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can also be used to, in 1 turn, power up Tantrum from Porygon Z, and also Stinger GX from our other Naganadel GX, which also should be ignored.
Yeah, and one of the crucial things that you need to remember, though, is that you can't use it on Buzzwole Pheromosa to get to that 8 energy cap. So this is what we were talking about before. We can technically get to that GX attack with using all but 2 of our energy. But because we've got all but 3 of our energy, sorry, because we've still got Beast to go. But because triple accelerated energy can only be attached to evolved Pokemon, Buzzwole, Pheromosa, and none of our other little babies can use it. So that's why we're only running a 2 count. It's not as universal as the others.
Yeah, and once you get past that early game and Porygon Z's in play, triple acceleration quickly becomes a dead card in your hands, where you have the choice between attaching a triple acceleration energy or just attaching an extra unit and a couple recycle when paying for it for free.
Yeah, exactly.
Why would you attach the triple acceleration when you can just have it for free?
Yeah, you can just have it, and then the discard you get to get them back anyway. So who cares?
Exactly. And lastly, what Ultra Beast deck would be complete without Ultra Beast Energy? Rhythm Star.
Yeah, and the good thing about Beast Energy is that it puts some of your attacks into some really good cohesive numbers with Venom Shot. It means that Buzzwole or Xurkitree on the relevant turns can half hit or they can half hit anything in the game, as opposed to if they didn't have it, where they'd only be doing 120. Things like Reshiram Charizard or Mewtwo both have 270 and can sometimes get in that awkward half-hitting range. And when Mew's in play on your opponent's side of the board, you need to make sure that your numbers are correct. So those numbers can be boosted by Beast Energy, as well as Venom Shot if you're choosing to knock something out in the active. Maybe your opponent goes, there's no way that you can do more than 170. I'm just going to try and soak this one up with an Ultra Necrozma. No, you can do the 200 damage to the active with the Beast Energy, so you can get the knockout there if that situation comes up. I'm sure Blake is saying something witty and intelligent here. Are you still there, mate? You've disappeared a little bit again.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. The other thing you can do with the old Nagano GX is obviously most of the time we're not going to have the max beasts in play because we need a Porygon. So with all but one of your Ultra Beasts in play, you are hitting for 100 damage, and with a beast it's 130, so you get to that sweet 260 mark on Mewtwo, which is just 10 short, but luckily we play Mew and Jet Punch, so you can get yourself there with one of your other little attacks as well.
Yeah, if your opponent can't heal it off, then you're in with a shot to take that knockout. But yeah, this is a really interesting deck that is by no means finished. This is just a list to start off with that we've been mucking around with. But it does have a little bit of potential, and it's definitely worth persisting with. Would you agree, Blake?
Absolutely. I think this deck has unlimited potential. This Porygon engine, powered by Nagano GX, allows you to do pretty much anything. It doesn't even have to be limited to Ultra Beast. You could power just about any GX attack or GX Pokemon's attacks as you like, depending on what special energy you'd like to put in the deck. It just so happens that it has better synergy with Ultra Beasts, so that's what you start with, but honestly I could see any number of Pokemon being put in specifically to use their GX attack to finish the game and stuff like that, but at this is just what we've started.
Yeah, there's plenty of things you can look at. Any Pokemon is ripe for the picking. It doesn't have to have a specific energy cost. You've got the unit, you've got the rainbow, you can do whatever you like. Anyway, thanks Blake for coming along and doing this one with me.
No worries.
And thanks everyone for coming along. If you like the content, please consider subscribing by clicking the sable eye in the middle of the screen. On the left hand side are some videos YouTube thinks that you'll like. And on the right we have our Unified Minds Worlds playlist for more testing from the sable eyes. Thanks everyone for coming along, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.